Welcome to Alas, Vine and Hitchens. I am Sarah Vine.
And I am Peter Hitchens.
And this week we will be asking, why does the population seem to be turning to tobacco again? And what now, 1 year on from the Southport riots? Join us after the break. Welcome to Alas, Vine and Hitchens. I'm Sarah Vine.
And I am Peter Hitchens.
This week we're going to be talking about smoking and riots. And, of course, we will get to your letters and emails at the end of the podcast. But first, Peter, take it away.
It's astonishing. Even in my childhood, it was quite clear to everybody that smoking would kill you. And not just kill you, but kill you in an extremely unpleasant way. I remember age, I think about 6, being in the back of my mother's Morris Minor 1000 in the Guildhall Square in Portsmouth, and seeing across the square an enormous poster featuring an ashtray and an urn of cremated ashes. And the slogan on it was "Ashes to Ashes."
Brilliant.
Absolutely. It's stuck in my mind. And as you see, it's still there. It's not something we didn't know. It's something we were told. In fact, my brother and I, around about this era, tried to campaign to get our mother to stop smoking because we didn't particularly want her to die. And I remember we used to make fake cigarettes out of horrible weeds and things, which we'd grilled on a radiator, and stick them in her packet of Guards cigarettes in the hope that she would smoke them and be so disgusted she'd give up. She played along with this, actually, quite charmingly, and pretended to be fooled, but she wasn't going to give up, and she never did. And my brother, despite taking part in this campaign quite militantly, himself became an enthusiastic smoker who was once accused of smoking to keep warm. And it is funny, but ultimately I'm quite sure that it was one of the reasons why he died so young. And died, I have to say, very unpleasantly indeed, in a way I wouldn't recommend to anybody, having seen the latter stages of it. But the interesting thing was, in his final months of life, I remember going to visit him in Washington, D.C., and we climbed up onto the roof of his apartment building to look at the fantastic view of the city. And as we were standing there, he lit up, and I said, "Hang on a minute, you're undergoing incredibly expensive therapy for the results of this, and now and it was obvious he knew it was all over anyway.
Might as well have a fag.
But he could not even then stop. So again, the other thing about the 1950s and 1960s, when we all knew, we also knew it was an incredibly hard habit to break. Everybody who started it said, "Oh, don't start, you'll never be able to stop." But did we pay any attention? Well, I did. I did the usual things in my early teens of having a go to see what it was like and being uninterested. But millions and millions and millions of my co-evils started smoking, carried on smoking, and in many cases did not stop. And why did they do it? And now, why is it coming back? Everywhere I go, it seems to be on again. And I'm watching currently a thriller series on Channel 4 called The Veil, in which
Is it The Veil, V-A-L-E, or V-E-I-L?
V-E-I-L. It doesn't make much difference to what's in it. But Elizabeth, what's her name, the woman who was in the Handmaid's Tale, whatever her name is, she is the star. In the opening scenes, she repeatedly smokes. Completely unnecessarily. They forget to put it in the script later on. She stops doing it. But it's in there. Why do they put it in? Every time somebody lights up a cigarette on screen, somebody feels it's legitimized in doing it in real life, and it's coming back. And I wonder what the reason is. Vaping having, you might have thought, sort of taken over. Is it that there's a huge consignments of smuggled cigarettes now arriving in this country cheaply? Or is it just that people are actually going back to it?
I think vaping encourages smoking, actually, funnily enough. But I just want to tell you that I once caught my father smoking in the shower.
Yes, I think my brother used to do that as well.
He had the shower curtain closed and he was smoking through the shower curtain, but he smoked cigars.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, they're harder to put out.
Yes, they are hard to put out. Anyway,
you make a terrible mess.
That is dedication to that, and also I've had friends over the years who have struggled with alcohol and drugs and all that sort of stuff. And the one thing they never manage to kick is the cigarettes. Is the thing that they always hold on to is the fags.
But you have written about smoking yourself.
Yeah, I
Tell
love
us about
smoking.
the attraction.
I love smoking, but the thing is, I am not a smoker. So I will not smoke at all for months on end, and then I'll go to a party and have basically, if I have more than 3 glasses of wine and someone offers me a cigarette, I go, oh yes, that's fun. And I smoke a cigarette, but I've never been a smoker. I don't sort of buy tobacco. I don't smoke lots of cigarettes. I don't find it even remotely addictive. I enjoy smoking, because, like, the feeling, I guess, it's just sort of something to do if you're in a social situation. But I don't, I would never want to sort of get up in the morning and have a fag.
When did you start?
I don't know, probably I can't remember. I mean, probably at a party when I was about 21 or something.
Not at school?
No, not at school. No, that didn't really happen at school. And also I was very square, so I wouldn't have done it. I don't know.
Can't have been as square as I was, but
I don't know. But
practically hexagonal.
I agree with you. It's very bad for you, and it's a filthy habit. I mean, my grandfather.
How did it go through a whole generation after? I think the Richard Dole work was originally done in 1953, when the correlation between it and lung cancer was pretty much impossible to deny.
But just to go back to vaping, I think what's happened is that because the smoking ban came in 90.
Smoking ban?
In offices and tube stations. Remember you used to be able to smoke on an aeroplane? Do you remember that?
I do remember. I remember the London Underground used to have one carriage on each train,
exactly.
which was a rolling advertisement for not smoking.
And then we had that terrible
Everything
fire.
in it was yellow.
Exactly.
Including the people. Clouds of yellow filth rolling around. You wouldn't get in, you'd rather take the next train.
We had that awful King's Cross fire, didn't we? Which was caused by a cigarette caught in the escalator.
So they say.
So, well, that's what anyway. So, but the point is that smoking in sort of offices. When I started working in journalism, everyone smoked at their desks the whole time. The entire room was full of smoke. So smoking in offices, smoking in restaurants, smoking inside, basically in public spaces, sort of came in 2000s, didn't it? So I think that's why a lot of people stopped smoking. But then what happened was vaping came in. And vaping is a gateway drug to cigarettes, because I think it gets people addicted to nicotine. And you see, the thing about vaping is it slightly depends what vape you have, but some vapes are they don't smell. I mean, they're not like cigarettes, so that you don't have the smoky thing and you can sort of conceal it. So people have started vaping, and I've noticed in my children's generation, they all vape almost without exception. And they all started doing that around the age of 14 or 15 when, in the olden days, people would start fagging. And the worst thing about it was that the vape companies basically started producing the kind of vape equivalent of Alco-Pops. So brightly coloured vapes, the Lost Marys were very cool for one stage, and disposable vapes, and selling them to just kids. I mean, they were supposed to be able to buy them under the age of 16, but I mean, my kids found it very easy just to get them from the guy at the corner shop.
I've always been very shocked by the way that the authorities, having put so much effort into driving smoking backwards, were so complacent about vaping. Yeah. There's no research, as far as I know, on it. We don't know if it would turn out to be terribly dangerous. You haven't the faintest clue.
No, and the thing is, the feeling was, it's a helpful thing for someone who's on cigarettes to vape. And actually that's just not true, because the thing is about vaping is it's the same as smoking. It's an oral fixation thing. It's doing something with your hands and your mouth.
Is it to do with fatalism as well, though? We all know that if you go into a war zone, everybody smokes because they think, well, why shouldn't I? I might be blown to ribbons by a high explosive shell at any moment, so why not? Soldiers smoke.
It's other people in the last cigarette before you're executed, isn't it? That's the
sort of thing. But is it to do with an increasing belief that life doesn't really hold very much long-term promise?
I don't know. I think
worry too much.
I think it's a comfort thing. I think we all start out life breastfeeding. Basically, we all have a sort of, to a greater or lesser extent, we all have an oral fixation. We like to suck on things.
But quite a lot of people who do that don't smoke, so that can't be it.
Well, I mean, yes, but I mean, there are degrees and there are degrees. I mean, some children become obsessed with their dummies, others don't. I mean, everyone's different. But I think that the cigarette thing is partly to do with that, but also the nicotine is very powerful. And this is the problem with the vapes, is that the levels of nicotine in the vapes are very, very high. And of course, nicotine is very addictive. And so quite often what we've basically done is introduce a whole generation to the joys of nicotine. and
Sounds
so that's
like a case for legislation.
So that's why I think that's why the cigarette smoking has sort of re-emerged, because if people can't charge their vape, which quite often they can't, or if they can't find their vape, or if they've run out of vape liquid or whatever, they'll have a fag. Whereas before they wouldn't have done.
How very sad. Well, if anybody's listening, don't do it.
No, don't do it. Don't do it. I mean, don't do it, kids.
I've seen the consequences, and I don't think that people realise until it comes to them in detail.
No, exactly.
What they are. It's not you don't just smoke and then suddenly become ill and die. It isn't like that at all.
No. have the lung cancer rates been rising? I don't know the answer to that question.
I don't think anyone's. I
don't know if any
see
of our
no
listeners
sign
do.
anyone's doing any work on it. After who's going to pay? The vape companies are going to pay.
Well, no.
The government,
Well, of course,
presumably.
vape companies, I think, are now owned by the tobacco companies. I mean, I think
Presumably, the tobacco
they're
companies
just
long
all in the
ago
same-
realised they needed
Yeah.
to move into something else.
Yeah. So I think they
I
started
always thought it was
buying
going to
them
be
up.
marijuana.
Well, I mean, that's the other thing. And again, I can only talk from what I know from being in close contact with young people a lot, because that's my life, is that they all smoke to some degree or other, marijuana or hashish or any of the, one of those, one or the other. And of course, that is mixed in with tobacco. And so the tobacco is introduced in that way as well. And they tend to buy loose tobacco for those purposes. But, basically, yes, tobacco is... And given the levels of dope smoking in this country and generally, you've got a sort of exponential rise in the level of tobacco consumption.
Which just goes to show it's an uphill struggle.
You've got a very sad face now. I'm sorry. But yes, you are completely right. And I think...
I thought you'd resist me more.
What, on the smoking?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a choice, isn't it? I mean, you can say to yourself, drinking alcohol is bad for me, driving a fast car is bad for me, going paragliding is bad for me.
And not in
All
the
of
same
these
way.
things are risky.
Not in the same way.
You can drive... Well, I mean, dying of cirrhosis of the liver is no less unpleasant than dying of lung cancer. These are all... the point is that we all have vices to a greater or lesser extent. It's how you control them and it's how you manage them. I know you don't have any vices, but, most people do have vices. And I suppose you sort of pick your poison a bit, don't you?
That's the point. But there are some things that are just not essential to life. My vice is greed. I love food. That's my principal one.
Yeah.
And so whenever I'm thinking of other people, but the thing about smoking is that it has no purpose other than smoking. It's not if we have to eat; it's part of life. And so if you eat too much, it's an extension of eating. It's not.
Yeah.
But smoking is something entirely different. Society never needed to have it in the first place, and there was a moment a few years ago, and it looked as if we might be able to get rid of it entirely.
Yes, but
And
I suspect
that moment has passed.
Yes.
It's over, and we're now either returning
But I mean, the same is true of
worse.
alcohol, isn't it? You don't need to drink alcohol, but people like drinking alcohol.
I don't know whether civilization can function without wine myself. I have a suspicion it can't.
I completely agree with you on that, Peter. Anyway, let us know what you think. Do you smoke?
I mean, wine is in the Bible as well as being very,
It is in the Bible.
very
Are
present
cigarettes in the
in
Bible?
all the great Greeks.
Is there any smoking in the Bible?
No, there's no smoking, and there's no beer in the Bible either.
No, well, probably because it hadn't been
Or
invented.
gin.
Or gin, just wine.
There's
Wine is allowed.
a lot of wine in the Bible.
Very good. Let us know. Do you smoke? Have you smoked? What do you feel about it? Do you vape? Do you think vaping is a gateway drug to smoking?
And are you going to stop?
And are you going to stop? And otherwise, Peter's going to come round your house and make you stop. You can email us at alas@mailonline.co.uk, or you can leave a message on Spotify. After the break, we're going to be talking about riots. That's my conversation. Join us after. Welcome back. I'm Sarah Vine, and it's almost a year since the Southport riots, which fascinate me because I think, well, it looks as though they're about to start again, but I am fascinated by the whole concept of dissatisfied people rising up against their governments. And I thought that, Peter, you might be somebody who could speak authoritatively on this. Have you ever yourself been involved in a riot?
I've been present when people have rioted. I remember particularly one occasion when I was in demonstration against the Rhodesian regime of Ian Smith in the Strand. And somebody shouted out, "They've left South Africa House unguarded. Let's go and bleep them up." And a whole gang of people rushed. It wasn't a very long distance from there.
Trafalgar Square, isn't it?
Square. And the police had indeed left it unguarded, and there was a great... I took no part in this.
Of course not.
Well, I didn't. I had more sense, even in those days. People did, purely for the joy of it, smash as many of the windows as they could before the police could get into position to protect the building. And it confirmed the view I've always held, which is that people riot because they enjoy it.
Is that what you think?
Oh, absolutely.
So do you think that's what happened with the
Lenin
Southport?
called riots festivals of the oppressed. I think the people have fun and they're dignified by calling them riots. I once had the job of covering some so-called riots in France when the large parts of the banlieue, the people where the North Africans were confined, appeared to have exploded. What was actually happening was quite small groups of youths were setting fire to cars. It was just an awful lot of arson, which people enjoy. Again, setting fire to things is fun, and that's why they do it.
And there seemed to be a sort of group of sort of almost professional rioters who are kind of always they're the same people who are always causing problems. But these
I've never seen that. I wouldn't know. I mean, it's possible. Certainly in some states, you would almost certainly have agents provocateurs sent in by the police to start this kind of thing happening, so to justify the very violent response which the police would then give. But I don't think that happens here.
But what's interesting
Not yet,
about
anyway, thank
the
heaven.
riots that we've been seeing here, or the protests, whatever you want to call them, is that traditionally in the UK, protests have been about things happening elsewhere, usually in the world, as you say, Rhodesia, etc. But these are protests about people's lives as they are currently in the UK. And it seems to me that there's a kind of general groundswell of dissatisfaction and unhappiness and a feeling of alienation. I think that reminds me a little bit of the sort of poll tax riots of the late 80s.
Well, I missed those. I was abroad, but I was always very doubtful as to whether they could really be called riots. The idea that they somehow changed government policy or that it was a genuine popular uprising. And there are people in any city who are prepared, if the situation looks favourable, to smash things up and set fire to things. It's extraordinary how many of these people get particularly worked up about shops selling high-end electronic goods.
Yes,
I find.
Especially in LA. They seem they have to go
here as
them.
well. I mean, there were some supposed riots in London a few years ago. Remember those?
In the summer, yeah.
And they weren't riots, they were just outbreaks of disorder. What happened was that an awful lot of bad people realised that there was nobody there to stop them. And for many hours, there was nobody there to stop them, so they took what they could. And it was their fury against chains selling high-end electronic goods and expensive clothes and trainers was particularly strong and noticeable. I went to the trials afterwards of some of the people who were caught, and these are just as pathetic stragglers who turned up later to see what was left in the trainer shops. But the bad guys generally got away with it all. So do we think this sort of moral panic that seems to be happening? I mean, all the politicians are sort of panicking about this protest in Epping Forest, and now it's moving to Canary Wharf. Disorder is nasty.
It is not. It is nasty. But is it something that you can actually prevent?
Of course you can. It could, absolutely effective policing. In fact, it's always seemed to me that when these supposed riots erupted after the Southport murders, the response of the authorities was actually quite effectively firm. People were arrested, were swiftly prosecuted, and were swiftly punished. And that's what a government has to do. Unless you want disorder, and anybody who's
it doesn't seem to have worked.
Anybody who's seen disorder, it has worked because at the time it very rapidly came to an end when it could have become, I think, much more widespread.
Yes, but I think I
don't blame them. People keep on about two-tier Kia and all the rest of it, and it may well be true. But any government's principal duty is to keep the country orderly. And if you let disorder take over, then nobody benefits. It's terrifying.
No, you're correct. But the thing is
public disorder is a terrifying thing to be caught up in.
Absolutely.
Anywhere near you would not like it.
No. Well, I mean, I have had a little taste of it occasionally. But particularly with the Southport riots, a lot of the people who've been arrested, there's been a big campaign. What's that woman called who's in jail for 2 years?
Lucy something, yes.
Yeah, Lucy. And so what's happened is that instead of it sort of dampening down the kind of feeling of unrest, it seems to have just pushed it underground, and now it's popping up again.
I don't know. Because
these are all people who are supporters of those original rioters who are now even more upset because they feel they've been overly punished. They feel they've been, made scapegoats of, and now they're coming back.
Well, they see a country in which huge amounts of crime goes unpunished, sometimes for political reasons, sometimes for reasons of feebleness, and they then see that other kinds of crime are punished, and they, rather than saying, well, okay, right, let's campaign for all sorts of crime to be punished, which is my response.
Yes,
they say this is unfair on us. We shouldn't have been punished, but do you honestly think that you should be able to get away with public disorder in the streets?
No,
I don't think you should.
I'm just curious because what I mean to say is I think what's causing these demonstrations seems to have quite firm roots in society. People seem, keep cutting it back, but it keeps growing back, is what I'm saying. It doesn't seem to be going away.
If you have I don't like to dignify these events. I don't think that most of the people who take part in them have got two political thoughts to rub together.
No, probably not.
Who have any serious objective other than a vague discontent. In some cases, I feel sorry for them, partly because they've been so poorly educated and so poorly served, and they've been abandoned. There are large parts of this country which, when you go to them, that's the first word that occurs to you, this place has been abandoned.
Yeah.
It's been abandoned by authority.
Ignored.
It's been abandoned by government. It's been abandoned by everybody. Nobody cares about it. And you can't expect people to live in places like that and be content.
No.
But then that doesn't necessarily mean that if they become discontented and become violent, that's a good thing either. That's a jump I won't make.
But don't you have to ask yourself why they're doing that?
No, I just explain they're doing it because they've been abandoned, and that's bad. So stop abandoning them. I'm all in favour of ceasing to abandon the poor in this country, and there's many things I would do tomorrow to make their lives better. One of the ways in which they've been most effectively abandoned is that the places where they live are not policed. So if you want to be bad, go and be bad somewhere where poor people live, and nothing will happen to you.
Nothing will happen to you.
The tougher and more brutal and more selfish and more violent and more acquisitive you are in places like that, the more you'll get away with it. People will be afraid of you, and the police will never come, and nothing will happen to you. Put that right, and half your problem is over. But I will not excuse civil disorder, because I've seen it and it scares me stiff, and I don't want anyone to get into their heads the idea that it's justified. It's a big jump to say these things are terrible and that therefore street violence is okay.
I think one of the problems with it is it leads to extremist political parties getting some purchase. Do you think that's the case?
Well, they may do. This, again, is one of the many reasons why the misgovernment of this country is increasingly dangerous to us all. And in the end, people get so discontented. If you have the whole basis of the design of our political system is that we have a parliament in which the real concerns of the people should be represented across the floor of that parliament. But we don't have that. We have a parliament which represents the interests of the elite from all three major political parties. I should now say the interests of the elite are represented downwards to the population rather than upwards from the population to the elite. It's all the wrong way around. I've campaigned for years for things which would fix it, and nobody plays a blind bit of notice, but I don't think that violence on the streets is going to make that any better. But the problem with once you get violence on the street, the state has a very simple decision to make.
You're correct. Yeah,
is it going to let it rip, or is it going to stop it?
Yes.
If it stops it, then you end up with a much, much stronger state and much less freedom.
Yeah.
So in the end, the result of civil disorder is a reduction of freedom for everybody.
You're correct. But the problem here is that you've got a government that is trying to shoehorn groups of people into communities. And those communities don't want those groups of people to be there. And I can't see, because those groups of people have got to go somewhere because the government has no ability to push them back. They're continuing to arrive and in great numbers. And it just seems to me there's a stalemate. I don't see
This was evident 20 years ago.
Well, of course.
And again, I sit here now saying what I said 20 years ago. And now people are listening, but in the wrong way. 20 years ago, when it was fixable, when we could have done something about it and said this obviously has to end. State multiculturalism, the creation of separate solitudes in our cities, the complete failure to control migration to a level where integration was possible. All these things were not merely soluble, but actually quite easily tackled, particularly in the middle years of the Blair government, when they would not do it.
No.
And when the Conservative Party was totally uninterested in opposing it
I don't
either.
think
So here we are. What else can I do? But I'm not going to sit here now and say, well, great. Now I'm really pleased to see a civil disorder on the streets of my country, because I am not, and I will not condone it, and I will not welcome it. Or the people who advocate it, or the people who sympathise with it, or the people who make apologies for it, or the people who may thrive on it. Again, if once you get in your politics people who are equivocal about civil violence, then it really is the end.
So what do you think that these people who are protesting should do? Is there anything they can do to influence their circumstances?
I wish there were.
There isn't, is there?
I wish there were.
So they have no choice.
To me, it's the butterfly upon the road preaching contentment to the toad. I still manage to escape most of this. I know perfectly well, because I visit my own country a lot, including the city in which I live. I'm careful to go around it a lot and see what it's actually like. I know how people are living and that it is bad. But I can't say that outbreaks of civil disorder and window smashing and attacking the police is going to make it better.
Well, it won't make it better, but it's perhaps the only outlet that they now have. And that leads us to a place where...
There are lots of things for which there are very few outlets, and generally in our lives the best thing to do is not to give them an outlet at all. I'm all in favour of what used to be called self-control and is now called repression. Let's have more of it.
But
I am a very repressed person, you will have noticed.
I'm not sure. But I mean, no, I think there's...
Well, you should see me when I'm not repressed, is all I can say.
I think you have a good argument there, but what I think is that if you extrapolate this to its logical conclusion, then basically this country is ungovernable.
I think it's probably finished, yes. That's why I've been advising my children for many years to emigrate.
Leave, yeah.
Yeah, because I cannot see this working out well. We've spent so long ignoring these problems. And some people will only actually pay any attention to a problem when it comes up and butts them on the nose. A very unpleasant thing, which I saw for the first time some years ago during supposed May Day celebrations in Oxford, the first time I ever saw an actual nutting. And it's quite an astounding thing to see how quickly it can ruin your whole day. But people shouldn't have to wait until they're nutted by reality before they do anything. But if they do that, then they'll probably find that they can't do anything about it anyway. They left it too late.
The problem is, I think that a lot of British people are like you or I, kind of middle class, and we will just retreat into our little enclaves.
To the extent that you can.
To the extent that you still
can.
But
they're not, once civil disorder comes in a serious way, then nobody is safe.
So if you were the Prime Minister, what would you do about what's going on?
Well, I have a number of measures which, if I were given that office and had a majority in Parliament, I would do. And the first, I've said many times, I would announce the creation of new police forces, which would do what they're supposed to do and patrol the streets preventively. I would give them perhaps a year to be trained, and then that having been done, I would dismiss the existing police forces as useless and send them off to do something else because they obviously can't.
So that would align a little bit with
there are a number of other. That's the most single revolutionary striking action which any government could take to show earnest that it meant business. There are many other things to do with the education system and to do with the point at which criminals encounter prison. Not the ridiculous long sentences rubbish that Nigel Farage came out with this week, but the understanding that the problem with prison is that people don't encounter it these days until they're already hardened criminals.
Yes.
Get rid of that. To reintroduce discipline in schools so that people could actually learn. Encourage the rebuilding of the married family in which sons have fathers instead of nobody. All these things you need to do, but the most immediate one that I would do would be to announce the abolition of the existing useless police as soon as we built up a new one to replace it. That would be my first action now. 10 years ago, I would have given you a different answer. But this is now so pressing, the uselessness of the police.
Yes, because I suppose, yes. So presumably that would be a good manifesto for the Tories, wouldn't it?
They won't adopt it, though.
Why not?
Well, watch them. Because they're no use.
But,
they don't think. None of them think. They don't think. They don't understand. They don't visit the country. They don't think, and they're stuck within loads of cliches. For years and years and years, it was believed that the cause of stomach ulcers was stress. And they were treated on that basis by doctors for decades. It was rubbish. They're treated by it's an infection. They're treated by antibiotics, and once they discovered that problem was over. When we had our first child, we were told you must lie her on her front.
Oh yes,
this is what you must do.
No,
this is the opposite of the truth. No, constantly, people are obsessed with stupid non-solutions to problems. And in terms of law and order and running the country, we have that as well. And the main solution everybody in British politics seems to have to our problems is bombing Ukraine.
Yes, so that's true.
That's really going to make a difference.
I do think that if it was possible to, I mean, these people are rioting because the people...
They're not rioting.
Well, okay, they're not rioting.
It's just disorder.
They're doing civil disorder because of stuff that is happening in their communities. So as you say, if you stop that stuff from happening, then they're less likely to get wound up about it. Anyway, let us know what you think, whether there's a solution. If there is a solution, what it would be. How would you handle the problem of our almost annual tradition of summer rioting?
Well, you don't know when it's coming, that's the thing, but it will generally happen. It will generally happen in hot, dry weather.
So let's turn to some letters. And we just have a time for one email this week because it's a big email. It's from Terry in Manchester. And he says, one of the greatest moments in the history of Question Time, in my opinion, is when Peter was asked to recite a poem and his beautiful explanation afterwards of why poetry matters in education. A beautiful moment. There you go, Peter. You have been described as a beautiful moment.
I'm very touched. I think I was inspired at that moment.
And Terry's question is, do either of you have any poems you recommend for listeners? It's a dying art, in my opinion. Great show as always. Peter, you go first.
All right. Stopping by woods on a snowy evening. See if I can do this. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse may think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake. Between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of gentle wind and velvet flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep.
And that is by?
Robert Frost, great American poet.
Very beautiful.
He read a poem at the inauguration of John F. Kennedy. It's called Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, and I know that I've got a number of words in it wrong, but I have mainly got the rhythm and the rhymes right.
Well, you're better than me. I can barely remember my own.
So
verse.
don't write in and tell me the mistakes I made.
No, do write in and tell me.
Oh, all right, do write in.
Because we love that. I wanted to recommend, Terry, that you read Petrarch, because Petrarch is one of the three great Italian Renaissance writers, Dante also and Boccaccio. He wrote in about 1320 something or other, and he wrote the most beautiful collection of poems called Il Canzoniere. I'm not going to read them in Italian. Anyway, they're short verses, and they're all dedicated to his great love, Laura. And Petrarch was interesting because he was a very early humanist. He lived a lot of his life in Avignon during the time of the anti-popes, which I'm sure Peter knows about, which is when the papacy
very fine palace there.
Was split, and it was decided that Rome was too corrupt, and so a group of people set up an alternative papacy in Avignon. And it was there was a great flowering of reading books. There was a huge library there. I think it still is there if you can go and visit it. Anyway, Petrarch was a scholar, and he spent a lot of time there, and he fell in love with a woman called Laura. We don't even actually know if she existed, but Simone Martini, who was one of the early Renaissance painters, painted a miniature of her, which was in itself quite extraordinary because at that time most art was religious, and Simone Martini was one of the first people to, this was a portrait of a loved person as opposed to a picture of a saint or a god or of God or Mary or any of those people. Anyway, he wrote this incredible book, and I remember reading it when I was about 20, I think. And I just loved it. It's just very... Anyway, I'm going to read you the first verso of the Canzoniere. I'm not going to read it in Italian because that would be pretentious. I'm going to read it in the English translation. The title is Voi che ascoltate in rime sparse il suono. You who hear the sound in scattered rhymes of those sighs on which I fed my heart in my first vagrant youthfulness, when I was partly other than I am, I hope to find pity and forgiveness for all the modes in which I talk and weep between vain hope and vain sadness, in those who understand love through its trials. Yet I see clearly now I have become an old tale amongst all these people, so that it often makes me ashamed of myself. And shame is the fruit of my vanities, and remorse and the clearest knowledge of how the world's delight is a brief dream. So that's the first verse, and it goes on, and it's just beautiful, and I would recommend it to anyone. I also quite like Under Milk Wood. I like to listen to it on my Spotify when I go to bed. It makes me go to sleep. The Richard Burton one.
Yes. It has so lovely
gorgeous
phrases in it.
Crow black, snow
Bible black.
Yeah, very good. And I also like the poems of Wendy Cope and Pam Ayres. So there you go.
Well, I think we've discussed
smorgasbord.
Wendy Cope. Her greatest lines are, "Write it in fire across the night. Some men are more or less all right," which I think should be the banner of the feminist movement.
She is brilliant. And on that note, thank you for all of your letters and emails. We'll do more next week. We're a bit short on time this week. You can email us alas@mailonline.co.uk. You can leave a comment on Spotify or send us a voice note on WhatsApp 077 96 657 512 and start your message with the word alas. Thank you for listening.